Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the gaslit alleyways of Victorian London, where true crime wasn't just a fascination, it was a lifestyle. Picture this, you're dodging puddles on Fleet Street, the air thick with coal smoke, and the cries of newsboys hawking latest horrors, broadsheets, these lurid crime reports, sold faster than fresh bread, inked in gory detail for pennies. One cheeky reality check. You probably couldn't survive a week in 1840s London without tripping over a crime scene or a con artist selling murder souvenirs. Yes, that was a thing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. Let's see how far this creepy little community stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Rain taps against your window like a nervous witness as we rewind to 1811. London's East End is a maze of shadow and sin, where sailors and slaughterhouses rub shoulders. Enter the Ratcliffe Highway murders. Two families butchered in their beds, their skulls caved in with a shipwright's maul. The killer, likely a seaman, left a trail so clumsy he dropped his bloody weapon twice. Yet the police, in their glorious inexperience, arrested an innocent man who conveniently hanged himself in custody. Case closed, or so they thought. Historians still argue whether the real killer fled to sea or died unnamed in some squalid tenement. But here's a quirky tidbit. The murders sparked Britain's first ever police manhunt flyer, a crude precursor to the modern wanted poster, and that mainstream fact, the Ratcliffe Highway panic directly inspired Parliament to fund London's first professional police force. Too bad they bungled the case before the ink dried on the legislation. Outside, the rain drums harder now, a relentless echo of those long-ago footsteps. The year is 1811, and London's Ratcliffe Highway isn't just a street. It's a slaughterhouse waiting to happen. You're trudging through the damp December gloom, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you question every shadow. The air reeks of gin and rotting fish, and the flickering oil lamps do little to push back the darkness. This is where two families will be butchered in their own homes, their deaths so brutal they'll ignite a national panic. Britain's first true crime media frenzy. Timothy Marr, a linen draper, is the first to fall on the night of December 7th. He locks up his shop, unaware that in a few hours, his skull will be crushed like an eggshell. His wife, baby, and apprentice are slaughtered alongside him, their bodies left in grotesque tableaus. The murder weapon, a shipwright's maul, abandoned at the scene like a calling card. The killer is either arrogant or an idiot, maybe both. But here's where it gets bizarre. 12 days later, just as the city starts to exhale, another family is massacred a few streets away. The Williamson household meets the same fate, skulls shattered, throats slit. This time the killer leaves behind a bloodied ripping chisel, because apparently one bludgeoning tool wasn't enough. London loses its collective mind. Newspapers scream about a monster loose in the city, and for the first time, crime reporting shifts from dry legal summaries to sensational, pulse-pounding horror stories. Historians still argue whether the murders were the work of one man or a twisted duo. The prime suspect, a sailor named John Williams, who conveniently dies in custody before trial, hanged in his cell, officially ruled a suicide. Case closed, right? Not so fast. Here's the quirky tidbit. Williams's corpse was paraded through the streets on a cart, propped up like a macabre puppet, before being dumped into a crossroads grave, a superstitious practice meant to stop his ghost from wandering. And that mainstream fact, the Ratcliffe Highway murders, forced Britain to confront its lack of real policing. Until then, law enforcement was a patchwork of night watchmen and parish constables, more likely to be drunk on duty than solving crimes. The public outcry led directly to the Metropolitan Police Act of 1829, birthing Scotland Yard. Outside, the rain hammers down just like it did that winter. Somewhere in the storm, you can almost hear the echo of a shipwright's maul hitting the cobbles. The rain falls steady now, a cold Edinburgh drizzle that slicks the cobblestones and muffles the sound of shovels biting into fresh earth. You're standing in the shadow of Greyfriars Kirkyard in 1828, where the line between medicine and murder has never been thinner. Two men lurk in the churchyard's gloom, William Burke and William Hare. They're not here to mourn, they're here to harvest. At first, their business model seems almost respectable. Edinburgh's medical schools are desperate for cadavers to dissect, but the law only allows the use of executed criminals. Supply can't meet demand, so Burke and Hare start digging up the recently buried, selling corpses to the anatomists for a tidy profit. But why waste time unearthing bodies when you can create fresh ones? Their first victim is an elderly lodger in Hare's boarding house who dies owing rent. Rather than bury him, they sell his body to Dr. Robert Knox, a charismatic anatomy lecturer who asks no questions. The payout is too good to ignore. Soon, Burke and Hare graduate from opportunistic ghouls to active murderers, targeting the vulnerable, prostitutes, the sick, the elderly. Their method is chillingly simple: get the victim drunk, then suffocate them, a technique later dubbed Burking. No marks, no struggle, just a quiet disappearance. Historians still argue whether Dr. Knox knew the bodies were murdered. The man himself never faced charges, though his reputation never recovered. Here's a quirky tidbit. Burke and Hare's crimes led to the Anatomy Act of 1832, which legalized the donation of unclaimed bodies, effectively putting resurrection men out of business. The mainstream fact: Burke's skeleton still hangs in Edinburgh's Anatomical Museum, his skin tanned into a pocketbook now lost. As for Hare, he turned king's evidence and vanished into history, perhaps the only man to profit twice from death. The rain pools in the empty graves as you imagine Burke's final words on the gallows. You're sure to get a better price for a fresh one. The patter of rain against your window mirrors the steady drip of arsenic into teacups across Victorian England. You're in 1850s Britain, where poison is the perfect murder weapon, odorless, tasteless, and sold over the counter as fly powder. The streets might be lit by gaslight now, but the home is where the real danger lurks. Take Sarah Chesham, dubbed Sally Arsenic. When her husband and children die mysteriously, neighbors whisper about her suspiciously good luck, collecting on multiple life insurance policies. Or Mary Ann Cotton, who left a trail of 21 dead husbands, lovers and children in her wake, all with similar stomach ailments. The common thread: a white powder, stirred into their tea or porridge. What makes the arsenic epidemic so terrifying is its domesticity. Wives kill husbands for freedom, servants murder employers for inheritance, and parents dispatch unwanted children, all with a substance kept in the kitchen cupboard. The Bradford sweets poisoning of 1858 proves no one is safe, when 21 people die after buying arsenic-laced peppermint drops meant to be harmless candy. Historians still argue whether arsenic's popularity stemmed from its accessibility, or the era's lax death investigation. Here's a quirky tidbit: Victorian wallpaper often contained arsenic, leading to slow poisoning. Some speculate this contributed to Napoleon's death in exile. The mainstream fact: the Arsenic Act of 1851 finally regulated sales, but not before countless sudden illnesses went unexplained. As the rain slides down the glass, you can't help but eye your tea with suspicion. The rain falls in Whitechapel like a curtain of needles, needling through the autumn fog of 1888. You're walking the same cobbles where 5 women, maybe more, will meet their ends at the hands of history's most infamous phantom, Jack the Ripper. The first body is found in Bucks Row on August 31st. Mary Ann Nichols lies sprawled, her throat slit ear to ear, abdomen mutilated with what police will call considerable anatomical knowledge. The killer works fast. In under 10 minutes, he's vanished back into the warren of alleys. Then Annie Chapman on September 8th. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes on September 30th. The double event. Finally Mary Jane Kelly on November 9th. Butchered in her own room with a savagery that shocks even hardened detectives. The Ripper isn't just killing, He's performing, leaving organs arranged like macabre still lifes. The letters start arriving at Central News. Dear boss, taunting police, promising more violence, signed with that now iconic nickname. Is the author really the killer? Historians still argue. Here's a quirky tidbit. One Ripper suspect was a Russian secret agent, another a royal physician. Theories range from plausible to utterly absurd. The mainstream fact: the murders forced London to confront its East End slums, but the Ripper's identity remains the ultimate cold case. Outside, the rain keeps falling, just as it did when Bobby's lantern swept those blood-slicked stones. The rain comes down in sheets now, pounding against the canvas roof of your covered wagon as you bump along the Osage Trail in 8. Up ahead, a lantern swings gently in the darkness. The Bender family's inn, a welcome sight for weary travelers. What you don't know: that lantern might as well be a carnivorous plant luring in flies. Step inside, and you'll disappear forever. The bloody Benders' Pa Ma, John and Kate, run a respectable-looking way station along the lonely prairie road. Travelers stop for a hot meal and a bed, unaware that the seating area hides a trapdoor above a shallow pit. As guests eat, one of the Benders would slip behind them and deliver a hammer blow to the skull. The body would tumble into the pit below, where they'd strip it of valuables before burying it in the Kate, the daughter, plays the role of Bait, a charming young psychic who lures single male travelers with promises of seances and companionship. The family's grift is horrifyingly effective. At least a dozen victims, possibly many more. Their undoing comes when a doctor searching for his missing brother notices the Benders' orchard has suspiciously fresh soil and an unnatural number of turnips buried in neat rows. Historians still argue whether the Benders were America's first serial killer family, or just particularly enterprising frontier predators. Here's a quirky tidbit. Kate Bender allegedly escaped capture by disguising herself as a man and joining a Wild West show. The mainstream fact: the case led to Kansas forming its first proper state investigative unit. As the storm rages outside, you realize too late why the Benders guest book has so many names and so few repeat visitors. The rain turns to sleet as you step into Chicago's 1893 World's Fair, where the dazzling white city gleams under electric lights. But just beyond the fairgrounds, in the Inglewood neighborhood, a different kind of attraction awaits, one with hidden soundproof chambers, greased chutes, and gas pipes feeding into locked rooms. Welcome to H.H. Holmes's Murder Castle, where check-in is optional, but check-out is impossible. Holmes-born Herman Webster Mudgett is the perfect Gilded Age monster, a handsome pharmacist with a smile that disarms, and a mind that calculates profit margins on human suffering. His castle is a maze of dead ends, trapdoors and soundproof vaults, disguised as a perfectly normal boarding house. Workers come and go, mostly go, never realizing they're building their own future tombs. His victims, mostly young women drawn in by his charm and promises of employment, though the full count remains unknown. Holmes experiments on them: suffocation, dissection, even slow asphyxiation in his custom-built gas chamber. Some he sells as skeletons to medical school, others simply vanish into the castle's labyrinth. Historians still argue whether Holmes was America's first modern serial killer, or just a particularly inventive con artist who escalated to murder. Here's a quirky tidbit. Holmes insured and then disappeared a man's corpse to fake a death for insurance money twice. The mainstream fact: his trial popularized the term serial killer and revolutionized forensic accounting techniques. As the fair's fireworks pop in the distance, you realize Holmes's greatest trick wasn't the murders, it was convincing an entire city not to notice the smell. The rain drums a steady rhythm on the roof of the Borden House in Fall River, Massachusetts, August 4, 1892. At 11:10 a.m. the heat is unbearable, the air thick with the smell of mutton broth and something sharper. Then the screams. Lizzie Borden stands at the foot of the stairs, her stepmother's skull split open in the upstairs guest room. Hours later, her father's body is found on the parlor couch, his face hacked beyond recognition. The crime scene is a study in Victorian repression, blood soaking into horsehair upholstery, a household where improper topics, like menstruation, were never discussed, now awash in gore. The murder weapon, likely a hatchet, though it's never found. The prime suspect, 32-year-old Lizzie, who stands to inherit a fortune and who, according to servants, tried to buy prussic acid, a poison, the day before. But here's where it gets complicated. Lizzie's alibi is shaky but plausible. No blood is found on her clothes. The prosecution's case relies heavily on Victorian sexism. A proper lady couldn't possibly commit such brutality. Never mind that Abby Borden suffered 19 hatchet blows. The jury acquits in just 90 minutes. Historians still argue whether Lizzie acted alone or if the family's Irish handyman was involved. Here's a quirky tidbit. Fall River still sells Lizzie Borden souvenirs, including miniature hatchet earrings. The mainstream fact: the case revolutionized crime scene preservation. Photographers documented everything, creating one of America's first forensic photo records. As the storm outside mimics the drip of blood from that parlor couch, you're left wondering, if Lizzie didn't do it, why did she burn her dress the next day? The rain falls silently on Villisca, Iowa, on June 10, 1912. The kind of quiet where you can hear a pocket watch ticking in another room. At 1112 East 2nd Street, the Moore family sleeps unaware that their home has become a hunting ground. By dawn, 8 bodies will be found. 2 parents, 4 children, and 2 young houseguests, all bludgeoned with an axe left ceremoniously propped against a wall. The killer moves through the house like a ghost, striking each victim as they sleep. The children's upstairs bedroom is a nightmare tableau. Bodies tucked under covers as if still sleeping, their heads caved in. Downstairs, the murderer takes time to cover mirrors with clothing, perhaps avoiding their own reflection. A plate of uneaten food sits on the kitchen table, suggesting the killer paused to eat amid the carnage. The investigation is botched from the start. Townsfolk trample the crime scene. Suspicion falls on a traveling preacher, then a jealous neighbor, then a serial laborer named Paul Mueller. Decades later, a deathbed confession from a Missouri man named Ross Moore, no relation, adds another layer of mystery. Historians still argue whether the Villisca murders were the work of a transient killer or a local with a grudge. Here's a quirky tidbit. The house still stands today as a paranormal tourism site, with visitors reporting the sound of children's laughter in the murder room. The mainstream fact: the case remains one of America's oldest unsolved mass murders. As the rain mutes the world outside, you realize some silences are heavier than others. The rain falls like slow tears over Los Angeles on January 15, 1947, turning the vacant lot on Norton Avenue into a muddy grave. A mother walking her child to school glances at what she thinks is a discarded mannequin, until she sees the pale hands frozen in rigor mortis. What remains of Elizabeth Short isn't just a body, it's a meticulously arranged nightmare, bisected at the waist, drained of blood, with grotesque Glasgow smiles carved into her cheeks. The 22-year-old who dreamed of Hollywood stardom has become its most infamous cautionary tale. You're standing in the crime scene now, the stench of wet earth and decomposition clinging to your clothes. The Black Dahlia case isn't just a murder, it's a performance. The killer washed the body, styled the hair, and posed the pieces with disturbing precision. The cuts are surgical, suggesting medical knowledge. The lack of blood at the scene means she was killed elsewhere, then transported like a macabre parcel to this empty lot. The media frenzy is immediate and relentless. Newspapers dub her the Black Dahlia for her rumored preference in dark clothing and flowers. The LAPD receives hundreds of false confessions, while real leads evaporate like morning fog. Elizabeth's past is picked apart, her relationships, her aspirations, even her dental records become front-page fodder. Historians still argue whether the killer was a single psychopath, or part of a larger underground network. Here's a quirky tidbit. The case inspired the first use of criminal profiling by investigators, though they wouldn't call it that yet. The mainstream fact: the Black Dahlia murder remains one of the oldest unsolved cases in LAPD history, with theories ranging from a jealous lover to a connection with the infamous Cleveland torso murders. As the rain pools in the depression where Elizabeth's body lay, you realize some stories don't end, they just fade to black. The rain falls like slow tears over Los Angeles on January 15, 1947, turning the vacant lot on Norton Avenue into a muddy gray. A mother walking her child to school glances at what she thinks is a discarded mannequin, until she sees the pale hands frozen in rigor mortis. What remains of Elizabeth Short isn't just a body, it's a meticulously arranged nightmare. Elizabeth's body has been severed cleanly at the waist, drained of blood, and washed before being posed in the empty lot. Her arms are raised above her head in a grotesque imitation of surrender, her legs spread apart at a 30-degree angle. The killer took time to style her hair and apply makeup to her lifeless face. Most horrifying of all, a Glasgow smile stretches from each corner of her mouth to her ears, giving her a permanent, ghastly grin. The crime scene shows no signs of struggle, no blood, no footprints in the mud. Just this carefully arranged horror displayed like a twisted art installation. Investigators would later determine she was killed elsewhere, possibly kept alive for days while being tortured. The precision of the cuts suggests surgical knowledge, perhaps a doctor, butcher, or someone with military training. Elizabeth Short had come to Hollywood chasing dreams of stardom, but found only bit parts and heartbreak. In death, she would become far more famous than she ever was in life. The press dubs her the Black Dahlia, a nickname inspired by her rumored preference for black clothing, and the 1946 film The Blue Dahlia. Historians still argue whether the killer was someone Elizabeth knew or a random predator. Here's a quirky tidbit. Over 60 people confessed to the murder, including several women. The mainstream fact: this case marked the beginning of modern forensic entomology. Scientists studied insect activity on the body to determine time of death. As the rain pools in the depression where Elizabeth's body lay, you realize some stories don't end, they just fade to black. The rain drums against the windows of the San Francisco Chronicle newsroom on August 1, 1969, as a tired editor unfolds a letter that will haunt California for decades. The handwriting is oddly precise, the tone chillingly casual. "Dear editor, I am the murderer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas." And with these words, the Zodiac killer begins his macabre correspondence, signing each letter with a crossed circle symbol that would become his terrifying trademark. You're standing at Lake Herman Road on December 20. The crime scene tape flutters in the damp night air as investigators examine David Faraday's blue Rambler. Inside, Betty Lou Jensen's body lies halfway out the passenger door. She managed to run exactly 28 feet before collapsing from 5 gunshot wounds to her back. David never left the car, killed by a single shot to the head. The killer left no fingerprints, no shell casings, just 2 young lives cut short on a lover's lane. 6 months later, the Zodiac strikes again at Blue Rock Springs Park. This time there's a survivor, 19-year-old Mike Majo, who will spend the rest of his life with bullets lodged near his spine. When police arrive, they find Darlene Ferrin slumped over the steering wheel of her Corvair, her purse still neatly placed on the dashboard as if she'd been reaching for her license. The Zodiac calls the police himself from a nearby payphone to boast about his crimes, his voice calm and measured. Historians still argue whether the Zodiac was a single killer, or multiple individuals using the same persona. Here's a quirky tidbit. One of his ciphers contained the phrase, "I like killing people because it is more fun than killing wild game." When finally cracked 51 years, the mainstream fact: the Zodiac case revolutionized how law enforcement handles communications with killers, creating protocols still used today for dealing with threatening letters and taunting messages. As the storm outside mimics the static hiss of that fateful payphone call, you realize some monsters don't stop, they just fall silent, leaving behind a trail of ciphers and questions that may never be answered. The rain hammers against the fuselage of Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 355 as it climbs through the stormy November night. You're sitting just a few rows behind the man in seat 18C, a nondescript passenger in a black trench coat and sunglasses who quietly hands a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She assumes it's a phone number until she reads the typed words, "I have a bomb in my briefcase." This is D.B. Cooper, the only man to successfully hijack an airplane and vanish into legend. As the 727 flies towards Seattle-Tacoma Airport, you watch Cooper calmly lay out his demands: $200,000 in cash, equivalent to $200 a tie, 4 parachutes, and a refueling truck standing by. His demeanor is so relaxed that passengers assume they're simply making an unscheduled stop when the plane lands to meet his demands. But the real drama begins after takeoff. As the plane heads south toward Mexico at Cooper's instruction, the cabin lights flicker, a signal that the rear stairway has been deployed. Somewhere over the dense forests of southwest Washington, between 8 and 8:13 p.m., Cooper does the unthinkable. With the money strapped to his chest and a parachute on his back, he leaps into the stormy darkness at 10,000 feet, into winds gusting to 100 mph and near freezing temperatures. The FBI will spend decades chasing leads. A boy finding $500 to $800 of the ransom money along the Columbia River in night. Suspect matching the sketch perfectly who turns out to have an airtight alibi. Over 400 credible suspects, investigated over 45 years. Historians still argue whether Cooper survived his jump or became another set of bones in the Washington wilderness. Here's a quirky tidbit. The FBI kept the case open until 2016, making it their longest-running unsolved hijacking investigation. The mainstream fact Cooper's heist directly led to modern airport security measures. The next year the FAA required physical inspections of all passengers and carry-on baggage. As your plane hits turbulence, you glance at the emergency exit and wonder, could someone really disappear that completely? The rain-streaked window offers no answers, just like the thousands of pages in the FBI's still-open case file. The summer rain falls warm and heavy over Los Angeles in 1985, doing nothing to wash away the fear clinging to the city's street. You're staring at a police sketch that's about to become the stuff of nightmares. Sunken cheeks, hollow eyes, and that snarling mouth twisted in a permanent sneer. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, is hunting, and he doesn't care who sees him. His calling card, satanic pentagrams scrawled in lipstick on walls and victims' bodies. His weapons, whatever's handy. Guns, knives, hammers, even his bare hands. The randomness is what terrifies you most. He attacks young and old, men and women in wealthy neighborhoods and poor ones. Sometimes he eats food from their refrigerators afterward. Sometimes he forces husbands to watch what he does to their wives. On March 17, 1985, Ramirez breaks into 79-year-old Jenny Vincau's apartment. What he does to her makes veteran cops sick. 2 months later, he shoots Dale Okazaki point blank in her car. The bodies pile up. Tsai Lian Yu bludgeoned with a tire iron. Chain-smoking Joyce Nelson stabbed 29 times. The LAPD is helpless as the city panics, with gun sales skyrocketing and hardware stores selling out of window locks. Then comes August 24, Ramirez's last night of freedom. After attacking Bill Carnes and his fiancée, he tries to carjack a woman but doesn't count on East LA's residents. A teenage boy recognizes him from TV news and leads a mob that beats Ramirez unconscious with a metal pipe before police arrive. Historians still argue whether Ramirez was a true Satanist or just using the imagery for shock value. Here's a quirky tidbit. During his trial, Ramirez would whisper, "Hail Satan" to jurors and flash pentagrams drawn on his palms. The mainstream fact. His case marked the beginning of 24-hour crime news coverage, turning serial killers into macabre celebrities. As thunder rumbles in the distance, you check your window locks twice before bed. The Night Stalker may be gone, but the fear he planted still grows in the dark. The Montana rain drums a steady rhythm on the roof of a 10-by-12 shack, hidden deep in the Lincoln wilderness. Inside, by the flickering light of a kerosene lamp, Ted Kaczynski drafts another manifesto with precise angry strokes. The Unabomber isn't just mailing bombs, He's mailing a revolution against technology, one parcel at a time. You're tracing his 17-year campaign of terror that began in 1978, with a package left in a Chicago University parking lot. The victim, a security guard who suffers severe burns when the crude device explodes in his hands. Then another bomb at Northwestern University. Then another targeting an American Airlines executive. The FBI dubs him Unabomb, University and Airline Bomber, before the media shortens it to Unabomber. Kaczynski's bombs evolve from simple pipe bombs to sophisticated devices with intricate trigger mechanism. He uses wood from his cabin to avoid leaving tool marks, files off serial numbers, and even adds false leads, bits of material meant to send investigators down wrong paths. His victims are carefully chosen symbols of technological society, computer store owners, geneticists, advertising executives. The breakthrough comes when Kaczynski forces the Washington Post to publish his 35,000-word manifesto. His brother David recognizes the writing style and alerts the FBI. On April 3, 1996, federal agents raid the Montana cabin where they find a live bomb ready for mailing, 40,000 handwritten journal pages, and the original manifesto typed on an old manual typewriter. Historians still argue whether Kaczynski was a genius or simply insane. Here's a quirky tidbit. The FBI's linguistic analysis of the manifesto became a landmark case in forensic linguistics. The mainstream fact: Kaczynski's campaign led to the creation of the FBI's first dedicated bomb task force, and revolutionized how law enforcement handles mail-based threat. As the rain slides down the cabin's single dirty window, you realize some of the most dangerous ideas come not from crowded cities, but from the lonely wilderness. The rain falls softly on Sacramento in 2018, the sound nearly masking the click of handcuffs closing around Joseph James DeAngelo's wrists. After 40 years, the Golden State Killer, the Visalia ransacker, the East Area rapist, the original Night Stalker, has finally been caught, not by brilliant detective work, but by a 49-dial DNA test from a genealogy website. You're rewinding to 1976, when a prowler begins terrorizing suburban neighborhoods. At first he's just a peeper, watching couples through windows, sometimes stealing single earrings as trophies. Then he escalates to rape, binding husbands with lamp cords while he assaults their wives. By 1978, he's murdering couples in their beds, shooting them execution style after the assaults. Then nothing. For decades the case goes cold. The killer's meticulousness is terrifying. He studies victims beforehand, knows their routines. He disables porch lights and unlocks windows in advance. After attacks, he calls victims to taunt them. At crime scenes he eats their food and takes bizarre souvenirs. A monogrammed knife, a class ring, a piece of wedding cake. The breakthrough comes when investigators upload crime scene DNA to a public genealogy database, finding distant relatives that eventually lead to DeAngelo, a 72-year-old former police officer living quietly in a Sacramento suburb. When arrested, his only protest is a mumbled, "I have a roast in the oven." Historians still argue whether DeAngelo stopped killing or simply became more careful. Here's a quirky tidbit. Detectives surveilled him for days, finally confirming his identity when they retrieved a discarded DNA sample from his car door handle. The mainstream fact: this case revolutionized forensic genetics, leading to hundreds of cold cases being solved through similar methods. As the rain fades to a drizzle, so too does our journey through crime's darkest corners. The Golden State Killer's capture proves that even the most careful monsters can't outrun time and science. The rain has slowed now to a gentle patter, a soothing rhythm against your window as we leave these stories in the past where they belong. Each tale we've walked through tonight, from London's foggy alleys to California's sun-baked suburbs, reminds us that darkness passes, that mysteries get solved, that justice, however delayed, eventually comes knocking. Breathe deep that clean rain-washed air. Feel the weight of these stories lifting as the night softens around you. The monsters are gone now, locked away in history books and prison cells. What remains is just the quiet, the steady hum of your fan, the comfortable weight of your blankets. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let the rain's lullaby carry you away from shadows into softer dreams. The night has kept its secrets long enough. Now it's time for rest. Sweet dreams, dear listener. The world will still be here, brighter and safer when you wake.